This week in the business of tech, Microsoft's recent multi-billion-dollar investment in OpenAI has raised concerns among competitors, while the push for right-to-repair laws is gaining momentum as 14 states have introduced new bills. In the field of insurance, coverage for cyber attacks remains limited, and Gartner predicts growth in zero-trust programs by 2026, despite unprotected areas of vulnerabilities. Tech worker pay is dropping as the labor market reshapes itself around remote work. But has the demand for cybersecurity experts changed? All the while, a Gallup report reveals a decrease in employee engagement and increase in disengagement. Mergers and acquisitions have decreased in the fourth quarter of 2022, while Microsoft's Q2 earnings show revenue up, but Windows OEM revenue falling 39%, and it's the perfect outline for IT services. All these stories and more. Hit those like, subscribe, and the notification button, and help us pay the bills. And here are this week's stories. That rumored Microsoft investment in OpenAI has come. The company is extending its long-term partnership with OpenAI through a new multi-year, multi-billion-dollar investment. That figure had been rumored to be $10 billion. Microsoft has also previously purchased an exclusive license to the underlying technology behind GPT-3 back in 2020, after investing $1 billion in OpenAI in 2019. Meanwhile, the New York Times is reporting conversations within Google in response to ChatGPT, sounding the alarm within the organization. The talks are important enough that founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin have offered advice and input to Google. Why do we care? I've said for a while that I believe AI is a feature, not a product. I think that remains the case. The reason to care is that most organizations that will be using the feature are not ready for the impact of the technology. That's the opportunity right now, and will position solution providers effectively for the future. The need is to discuss not just how the tools will be used, but negative outcomes of their misuse. Early planning now will build relationships with customers for the future and position providers as forward-thinking. There is still time, and frankly, no better time. I've covered right to repair on the show before, noting New York passing the law at the end of the year, the recent agreement between John Deere and their lobbyists to work together, and program enhancements by Apple and Samsung to try and get ahead of the trend. Colorado also has passed a bill focused on wheelchairs. The laws are coming now, as at least 17 states have introduced new bills so far, per Nathan Proctor, Right to Repair campaign director at the U.S. Public Interest Research Group. He added in comments to Axios, quote, "If you're looking at what one of these companies really fears, I don't think it's a bill in Congress as much as 22 different bills in states that are all slightly different." Why do we care? The snowball is gaining speed. Unlike privacy laws, where a patchwork of laws will impact both customers and technology companies, I'm inclined to see the inconsistency as simply a burden on the manufacturers. I'd prefer this a consistent federal solution, but I don't know the complexity of multiple laws falling as harshly on consultants and service providers as privacy would. We care as the move allows providers to recommend repair over replacement in more circumstances. There's been a flurry of security reports too. In research sponsored by Arctic Wolf Networks, over 40% of U.S. businesses had either no cyber insurance or limits of $1 million or less, which may not adequately cover the cost of the average cyber attack. The report highlights that some insurance companies faced mounting losses related to their cyber insurance policies and abandoned the sector. Others reduced coverage, increased premiums, or amended policies to include more stringent risk mitigation requirements. Datos published its 2022 State of Ransomware report. Here are your highlights. About a fifth of the IT budget is dedicated to security, and many are seeing increased budgets. 47% of SMBs plan to invest in network security in the next year. 69% of SMBs currently have cyber insurance, and 34% of those without it will likely get it in the next year. Only 3 in 10 SMBs have a best-in-class recovery plan, with 52% claiming they have a standard recovery plan in place. 42% of SMBs with cyber insurance think it's extremely likely that a ransomware attack will happen in the next year. Only 16% of SMBs without cyber insurance think the same. And in potentially good news, blockchain research firm Chainalysis reports that since 2019, victim payments rates have fallen from 76% to just 41%. For context, that number was 50% in 2021 by their figures. The research firm's data is estimate only. There are cryptocurrency sites controlled by ransomware groups that have not yet been identified on the blockchain and folded into Chainalysis's data. This change can be attributed mainly to 3 things. First, the victims realize that paying the ransom does not guarantee they will get their files back, and that the threat actors will delete the stolen files. Second, the public perception of ransomware attacks has matured, and data leaks from these incidents tend to tarnish brand reputation. And third, organizations are following better backup strategies, which are also required for ransomware coverage insurers, often giving them a way to restore their IT infrastructures in case of attack. There's complementary data from Coverware too. They cite 76% of victims in 2019 paying, down to 41% of victims in 2022. Why do we care? This is less a security story and more an insurance one. The reporting implies that somewhere around 60 to 70% of insurance. Yet the data also indicates that insurance is getting harder to qualify for, and with fewer firms issuing policies. Organizations are also paying ransoms less, which is very encouraging news. Now, the optimist in me wants to believe the trend may be turning. Last week, the story was reported on how ransomware operators are shifting to extortion and focusing on leaked data. They're adapting because payments are down. The reality appears to be the continuing maturation on both sides of the fight as the attacker and defender move to the next stage. For providers, it's a sign to refresh their offering, which is fundamentally the same concept, yet defending against a new attack and implementation. And savvy implementers will be updating their customers on that new threat and the possible extortion angle. Every client needs cyber protection, but that doesn't mean service providers have to deploy a jumbled patchwork of solutions to get it done. Modern protection starts with Acronis Cyber Protect Cloud. Acronis combines backup, anti-malware, endpoint protection, management, and robust ransomware defense, all from a single console. That's why successful MSPs use Acronis to generate more recurring revenue and reduce churn. It's easy to get started at acronis.com. It's almost been too long since I talked about changes in work, so what better time than when the bigwigs at the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos, Switzerland bring it up? And this time, it's coming from the real estate executives themselves. Many buildings are obsolete and ready for the wrecking ball, said the executives, including the CEO of JLL and the CEO of Ivanhoe Cambridge. The message? It's time to face harsher reality. DC Mayor Bowser didn't get the memo, as during her inaugural address, she called out the federal government specifically, sending a clear message. Get your employees back to in-person work, or else vacate your lifeless downtown office buildings so we can fill the city with people again. I'm referencing Politico for that one. Over on the tech side of things, TikTok is also trying to crack down on remote work. The information is reporting that the company is telling some U.S. workers that they could lose their job if they don't show that their home address matches their assigned office location. Because there is data on how much time those workers got back, an average of 72 minutes a day per a paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research. That's worldwide, and it's 55 minutes in the U.S. Turns out most of those workers worked more, with 40% using the time on either a primary or secondary job, with 34% using the time for leisure. That same Axios article I pulled this from also notes how even the municipal bond market is being reshaped over remote work. Why do we care? It would be easy to call Mayor Bowser out. Yet ultimately, what she said and the real estate executives are saying is the same. We need to repurpose those office buildings. That's the real solution, because people aren't coming back. Well, why? Those 55 minutes. So why do we care? The players in long-term control of the assets are building plans that assume a new world order. You should be doing the same. Talk of remote work does naturally come with the discussion of pay. Insider reports how the current market conditions of possible recession and layoffs in tech allow some tech executives to reset worker pay. Data from Levels.fyi, a platform that collects data on tech compensation, shows that for 2022, median pay for a software engineer fell by almost 9% between the first and second half of the year. Pay for a hardware engineer is down 7%. For software engineering managers, it's down 10%. For product designers, it's down 13%. That said, it seems security isn't as impacted. The total number of employed cybersecurity workers in 2022 remained relatively unchanged from the previous estimates, at around 1.1 million, according to new data from the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education at the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, the trade group CompTIA, and data from firm Lightcast. Public sector cybersecurity demand grew by 25%, and private sector demand grew by roughly 21%. Gartner has some predictions about the labor market. They believe it will remain competitive and outline some specific guidance. They're expecting more quiet hiring, which is reskilling and upskilling current employees, and expect HR leaders will build more connections within the organization, specifically that rather than requiring them in the office. They predict less focus on prior experience and formal training and offer increased flexibility for new hires. Why do we care? The pay levels from 2022 may have been overinflated. I'm not sure I'll panic over a roughly 10% adjustment, and with cybersecurity in high demand, those with specialized skills will be in demand. There may be some pressure on providers on rates from customers, but I wouldn't worry too much. What I would consider is the trend of investing in people. That's continuing to be a theme, and for employers, I'd be thinking less about being able to pay staff a little less, and more about the investment required to keep them and grow them. I spotted an article in the San Diego News entitled "Must-Have Technologies to Rapidly Boost Your Small Business." While a short read, technologists will only care about the list itself, so here it is. First, customer relationship management or CRM software, cloud for data storage, cybersecurity technology, financial management software, live chat, project management tools, and online instant quote. Now, why do we care? This is a short but critical story. Infrastructure is entirely assumed in this list of technologies. The value is in the productivity layer and protecting that data. We care because this isn't some discussion in an industry publication, but instead a customer-facing, mainstream publication. The message those business owners are hearing needs to align with your offerings, and if it doesn't, there's a problem. In a new survey from Accenture, 73% of executives said that if there were a recession, their organizations would accelerate their total enterprise reinvention strategies. So let's quote ZDNet here. What does total enterprise reinvention translate to in business speak? Quote, centered around a strong digital core, it helps drive growth and optimize operations. The report's authors, led by Julie Sweet, chair and CEO of Accenture, explains. This means reinventing and bringing together three levels of technical initiatives. First, infrastructure and security layer, a modern cloud-based IT foundation that is automated, agile, and secure by design. Second, a data and AI layer, AI-enabled applications and platforms generating insights for decision-making. And third, an applications and platforms layer, where new experiences and ways of operating come alive through modernization and new custom applications and platforms, or re-platforming on SaaS. Compare that with some data by the market research firm Omnida on behalf of Canonical, which finds that only 6% rely on a managed service provider to manage cloud infrastructure. That same survey also finds that 83% have seen spending on cloud infrastructure expenses increase over the last 2 years, and that 23% need visibility into how much they are spending. And one more. A study by Rackspace confirms that application-driven customer experience is a top priority for executives, cited by 48%, ahead of IT security, compliance, and even IT strategy. At the same time, current IT activity tends to focus more on driving automation efficiencies at 63% and IoT and cloud-native initiatives at 51%, versus customer experience technology initiatives focused on real-time data analysis, which is at 44%, and customer engagement at 30%. So why do we care? If I simplify the story of the data down, tough times are when organizations get smart about their investments because each dollar is harder won. The really successful organizations lean into change during downtimes, and that's what we see in the data. And too many aren't working with providers, particularly regarding their forward investments, like cloud. I'm taking my virtual highlighter and circling this area as a space to pursue. An SMB Global Market Intelligence report revealed that mergers and acquisitions by North American companies declined in the fourth quarter of 2022. S&P said this represented a decline compared to 2021 due to rising interest rates and a slowing economy that discouraged companies from deal-making. The report highlighted that M&A activity was particularly slow in the second half of 2022, with $517 billion in deals. This represented a 38.2% decline compared to the year's first half. For perspective, however, 2021 was a record high year for deal-making. Now, why do we care? Now, this is broader than technology companies and includes the whole North American market. Interestingly, Arlen Sorensen of IT Nation Evolve and ConnectWise noted some observations he already sees in his daily email. Due diligence is increasing, earnouts are becoming more common, valuations are slipping, particularly for lower EBITDA companies, oversight is increasing, and there's an increase in both mergers of equals and a steady interest in building platform companies. M&A remains a buzzy but small portion of the business sector. If you're interested in M&A, great, but don't be led to believe that the trend is dominant. M&A is being heavily discussed by those with a vested interest in M&A. And another update to that LastPass compromise. GoTo, the remote collaboration and IT software company that owns LastPass, has confirmed that, along with LastPass's password vaults, it had customer data taken by attackers during a November 2022 security breach. Many of GoTo's enterprise products were affected, including Central, Pro, Join.me, Hamachi, and Remotely Anywhere. GoTo is contacting affected customers directly to provide additional info as well as support for what actions to take. Now, why do we care? The lesson to focus on is how issuing notices piecemeal weakens customer confidence. Either they were holding back information, or they didn't know what happened, or their investigation wasn't well run, or some other lousy thought pops into customers' heads that causes doubt in their capabilities. This is not a good place to be. Transparency continues to be the best way to approach these issues, something to remember when the inevitable breach occurs for you or your customers. I wanted to dive into Microsoft's earnings. The company posted their second quarter of fiscal 2023 results this week. Revenue is up 2%, but net income has dropped by 12%. The results come just days after Microsoft announced 10,000 layoffs. Windows OEM revenue fell by 39% in Q2. Microsoft CFO Amy Hood provided guidance of mid to high 30% declines in Windows OEM revenue for Q3, alongside mid 40% declines for devices revenue. Hood blamed a slowdown in growth of new business for having an effect on revenue from various businesses within the company, including revenue from standalone Office 365, enterprise mobility and security, and Windows commercial products sold outside the Microsoft 365 suite. Microsoft Office, cloud, and server products drove revenue in Q2. Microsoft's cloud revenue is a significant influence on this quarter's earnings, with overall intelligent cloud revenue up 18% year over year. Server products and cloud services revenues grew by 20%, and Azure and other cloud services revenue grew by 31%. Due to the slowdown, Windows commercial products and cloud services will see relatively flat revenue growth year over year. And Microsoft also expects relatively flat growth in commercial bookings year over year, in part due to the slowdown. Now, one other bright spot. Teams surpassed more than 280 million monthly active users during the quarter, showing durable momentum since the pandemic, and they think it's going to continue to take share across every category, from collaboration to chat to meetings to callings. That number is up from 270 million last year. The number of third-party apps with more than 10,000 users increased about 40% year over year. The more than 500,000 active Teams Rooms devices is a 70% increase year over year. The number of customers with more than 1,000 rooms doubled year over year. Microsoft has added more than 5 million public switch telephone network seats for Teams Phone over the last 12 months, and Satya Nadella called Teams Phone the market leader in cloud calling. The call also revealed that Microsoft's revenue from its security technology business was $20 billion in the past year, up from $15 billion a year ago. Now, why do we care? I went to this level of detail with Microsoft's earnings, as it's an obvious indicator of what areas are hot and what are not when it comes to services too. Cloud, particularly Azure, Office, and the productivity suites, are the areas of growth. This also aligns with all of the market growth predictions, particularly with analysts, and with me too. Hardware, not so much. For providers, I'd be looking at the services revenue streams and determining how much is related to each growth area, and look to replace any that require those areas Microsoft is concerned about. This financial statement is the most explicit proxy for an IT services firm I could ask for, particularly with Microsoft's focus on business over consumer. A bit more on the Gartner prediction front. Gartner predicts that by 2026, 10% of large enterprises will have a mature and measurable zero trust program, up from less than 1% today. That said, the approach isn't a cure-all. Gartner analysts predict that through 2026, more than half of cyber attacks will be aimed at areas that zero trust controls don't cover and cannot mitigate. Gartner recommends that organizations implement zero trust to improve risk mitigation for the most critical assets, as this is where the greatest return on risk mitigation will occur. However, zero trust does not solve all security needs. CISOs and risk management leaders must also run a continuous threat exposure management program to better inventory and optimize their exposure to threats beyond the scope of zero trust architectures. According to a survey released on Tuesday by the Neurostar International Security Council, only about half of companies are getting the proper budgets they need to meet their current cybersecurity requirements. Less than 1/3 of IT and security professionals said their cybersecurity budgets would remain the same this year, while 6% expect them to fall. Of those, 44% said the budget stagnation or cuts would expose their businesses to more cyber risk. Why do we care? 10% of large businesses doesn't seem like a lot. The federal government has more of a mandate than that. I'm still a believer in the approach, but we'll note it's not a cure-all, and it's not moving very quickly, and it's hard to do. Someone who can figure this space out and implement it more easily will do very well. Let's quote from Axios here. Only 32% of employees said they were actively engaged at work or feeling passionate about their jobs, down from a high of 36% in 2020, according to a Gallup report, which averaged survey results across 2022. Changing requirements around remote and hybrid work and a lack of communication with managers are causing people to psychologically disengage, with increasing numbers feeling like no one cares about them. 18% of employees said in 2022 they were actively disengaged, meaning disgruntled and disloyal, the highest number that has been since 2013. The remaining half of workers are just doing the bare minimum to get by, says Jim Harder, Chief Workplace Scientist at Gallup. Young employees are feeling the most disconnected. Engagement for those under 35 decreased by 4 percentage points, while active disengagement went up by the same amount. Engagement fell across the board, whether someone worked remotely, in a hybrid arrangement, or on site. Workers who were in jobs that could be done remotely but were forced to work on site saw an increase of 7 points in active disengagement. A critical move that managers can make to improve engagement is holding one-on-one meetings with each direct report. One recent study found that they led to a 54% increase in engagement. Now, why do we care? It's that last data point. Good managers can improve engagement. The turbulence of the past 3 years is long lingering, and businesses cannot blame remote workers. The noise of tech layoffs in big companies is not playing out with data in services firms or in cybersecurity. Keep your people and work on engagement. Thanks for watching This Week in the Business of Tech. If you like this video, you can let me know with a like of the video, and even more valuable, hitting the subscription button. My content is all free, and I use metrics like subscriptions to pay the bills, so it has real value. The content here is produced under ethics guidelines posted at businessof.tech. If you're interested in more content like this, you can get access to content early via our Patreon at patreon.com/MSPradio. It's our give what you want model, where you set the value of what you think the content is worth. If you like this show, you can catch it daily as the 5-minute news and commentary podcast, The Business of Tech, available on all your favorite podcatchers, with links at businessof.tech. Just hit that big blue subscribe button. Again, thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen, and I really value the interaction. If you want to say something in the comments, I do respond and watch all of them, and I look forward to talking to you next time.